So as we get started this morning, I want to share with you a word from the book of Philippians. This is a letter that Paul wrote to the church in Philippi, and I'm just going to tell you, if you ever come to a place where you just need a joy infusion in your life, go to the letter of Philippians. It is a great passage of Scripture that speaks about, in a lot of ways, about joy and about what the Lord wants to do in your life. And today, I believe this section of Philippians speaks a powerful word into just the level of discontent that seems to be all around us these days. And so this is what Paul writes in Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 through 13. And he says this, he says, "I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances." I want you to just think about that word "learned" for a second. A lot of us think that, if I can just get this or get that or go here or go there, then I'll find contentment. That's really not what he's talking about here. He's talking about something that is a process. It takes time. I have learned, he said, the secret. I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I can do all of this through him who gives me strength. Will you join me in a word of prayer as we invite God just to center us on this word? God, I thank you. I thank you for what you're doing, even in this moment, in the hearts and in the minds of every person who is listening to this message. Lord, I thank you for how you've spoken to me in this message. And I pray, God, in these moments ahead, you would just move through the work of your Spirit in my life to get me out of the way, so that your word would be heard loudly and clearly. Thank you. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Last Sunday, at the end of each service, when I told you what I was going to be talking about today, I could tell by your reaction that we had really hit on the right notes as we planned this series of sermons. Because when I told you that I was going to talk today about how to find contentment in a culture of discontent, the reaction I gleaned from every person in the sanctuary, at least as I looked around the room, was, "Oh yeah, I need to hear that." I mean, I saw people's heads nodding. I saw people looking at people next to them. I even saw one person elbow the person next to them as if saying, "You better be there this next Sunday because you need to hear that." And I think we all do, because, well, let's face it, I think every single one of us lives with a certain level of discontentment in our lives in some place. And I happen to believe that our culture drives us toward discontentment so that it can then provide the solution for the unmet needs that have grown in our lives, that the culture has awakened in us, that sort of feed our discontentment. And I'm just going to tell you, never in my lifetime have I seen the people in our country and communities so polarized. I mean, a lot of times it's hard to have a conversation with someone if you might happen to disagree with their position or their opinion, because everybody's so afraid of offending the other person. And people get so triggered so quickly these days. Maybe you've experienced it. I certainly have. I mean, you just mention politics, or mention gender, or mention race, or oil, or guns, or the environment, or you can even mention Jesus in certain circles of people, and the blood pressure begins to rise. It's like there's this raging river of discontent that's always flowing just under the surface in our lives. But it's really nothing new. I mean, human beings have been dealing with discontentment perhaps since the very beginning. I mean, look at Adam and Eve. God placed them in a garden, and he surrounded them with everything that they might ever need or want to live the perfect life. I mean, he placed them in the garden where they would live forever with no pain, no death, no sorrow, no suffering, no needs or wants anywhere. I mean, God provided everything they needed to live the perfect life. But one day, Adam and Eve were convinced that that wasn't enough. One day, Adam and Eve were convinced that if they just agree that God really hadn't told them the truth, and they would then do the one thing God told them not to do, then they would have everything, and they would actually be like God. And so they ate. Discontentment. Have you felt it? I know I have. I grew up in a household where I don't think I ever really had any needs that went unmet. My parents were good providers, and I always knew that if there was anything that I really needed, they would work hard to try to meet that need. Now understand, I didn't get everything I wanted. But I know that I would never go through my growing up years at home with a need that went unmet. Well, there was one. Sour cream and onion Pringles. That's what it was, to be quite honest. I mean, it was my favorite snack food. I know for a lot of people, their favorite snack food might be Oreos or Bluebell ice cream or Snickers bars or Reese's peanut butter cups. For me, sour cream and onion Pringles. That was it. Hands down, that was my favorite snack. And my mother knew that. She knew how much I loved sour cream and onion Pringles. And my sisters always tell me that I was the favorite in my household. I don't know that that's really true, but my mother did get Pringles every time she'd go to the store, sour cream and onion Pringles, that is, and she'd put them in the pantry because she knew that I liked them. The only problem is my sisters liked them too. And so whenever I would have a craving for sour cream and onion Pringles, I'd go to the pantry. I would see sitting on that shelf at eye level that unmistakable green cardboard cylinder with a clear plastic top. I'd take it off of the counter in the pantry. I'd go and sit down at the kitchen table. I'd take off the lid, and I'd look down, and there would be maybe two left, and one of them was cracked. And you know you don't eat a cracked Pringle. And it's like I spent a life of perpetual frustration when it came to my favorite snack food and cravings. And so you know what I did? I did something somewhat radical, you might think. When I graduated from high school, went off to college, my parents drove me up to Georgetown, moved me into my dorm at Southwestern, and then they returned back to Houston. And the very first thing I did as soon as they left the city limits was I went to the grocery store and I bought 2 cans, not one, but 2 cans of sour cream and onion Pringles. I went back to my dorm room, went into my room, locked the door, sat on my bed, took my cassette tape, my Chicago 17 cassette tape, and I put it in the cassette player, and I put on the song Hard Habit to Break, and I ate. Both of them in like 15 minutes. And I got sick. And I look back on that and I think, how silly. But then, you know, it's really not. I mean, it's really kind of normal when you think about the lengths that we go to try to find contentment in life and try to fulfill those unmet needs that we have. All of it in search of that slippery thing called contentment. It's slippery because the one moment you think you've got it, and then the temperature changes, or something breaks, or somebody says the wrong thing, or you make a wrong turn, or you make a wrong decision, or Somebody eats the last Pringles and puts the empty canister back in the pantry. And all of a sudden, that feeling of satisfaction fades and you're left wanting. So how do we do it? I mean, how do we find contentment in this culture of discontent? Paul wrote in Philippians 4:12, he said, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. So what is that secret? Well, I know this much. You are not going to find contentment by changing your circumstances. You are not going to find contentment by changing your circumstances. I mean, so many of us think that if we just change our circumstances, we'll find contentment. And so we think that, if I can just put my feet in the sand on a beach somewhere, then I will be content. Or if I can just go on that vacation I've been longing for so long, I will be content. Or if I could just make a little bit more money to help not just pay the bills, but to get some of those things that I've been wanting for a long time, then I will be content. Or if I can just move out of this house and get into that house I've been really looking forward to, that's got a little bit more space here and a little bit more land there, if I could just get there, then I'll find contentment. Or I know people who are single and they think, if I could just find that person and get married, then I'll find contentment. Or I know people who are married who think, if I could just get rid of that person and be single, I could find contentment. I mean, some people think, well, maybe I can find contentment if I can just get the right career in front of me. And so a lot of us think that we can find our contentment through our work. And so we work hard. We work 80-hour weeks, and we push, and we drive, and we sacrifice. And then there comes this point in time in the midst of our driving and pushing and sacrificing that we just long for retirement. And so I want to ask you, what are you chasing after right now? Maybe it's a little bit more money. Maybe it's peace. Maybe you're looking for success or just some stability in your life. For a lot of people, it's always the next thing that they think will bring contentment in their life. The next thing, I mean, I'll tell you though, if I've learned anything in my life, I've learned that the next thing rarely brings fulfillment. It rarely brings the fulfillment that we think will fuel that contentment. And I know this has been the case for me. Jana has said this to me. This has happened so many times. We'll be sitting out in our backyard looking at the sunset, and we've got some beautiful sunsets that happen over the lake in our backyard. And we'll be sitting out there and watching the sunset, and then it'll take like 5 minutes, maybe sometimes 6, sometimes 3, before I'll say, I think it's time that I built blank. Or I'll say, I kind of really need to fix that. And she'll say to me, would you just enjoy the sunset and not think about what needs to be done next? You get it? I mean, the next thing. It's how we roll, though, I mean, it seems like the pace and the pressure of life just so often squeezes the joy right out of us. And so in our desperation, we search for joy and we search for contentment in a lot of different ways, like by getting stuff or by traveling or by engaging with people. But none of those things provide lasting joy or contentment. I mean, the reality is you're never going to find contentment in the next thing. You're never going to find real contentment through changing your circumstances, as hard as you might try. Solomon wrote this in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. This is a powerful word that speaks directly to this point. He said, after much thought, I decided to cheer myself with wine. I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect the water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the the kings that had lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. So I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, which was a reward for all of my labors. But then he says this, and don't miss this. As I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all meaningless, like chasing the wind. And there was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. Maybe you've discovered that in your life as well. You work hard, you buy stuff, you surround yourself with people, you take a vacation. You work hard, you buy stuff, you surround yourself with people, and you take a vacation. You work hard, you buy stuff, and you surround yourself with people, and you take a vacation, and nothing ever changes. It ends up feeling like you're just chasing the wind. I mean, you're not going to find contentment in changing your circumstances. And there's another truth I think we all need to understand about this, and that is that comparison is the fuel for discontentment. Comparison is the fuel for discontentment. Have you ever noticed how that works? I don't do Facebook, but every once in a while Jana will say, hey, take a look at this on her Facebook account. And I can't tell you how many times this happens. You know, you see the pictures they take of the great vacation spot they're in right now, you know, sitting on a beach somewhere, just in a beautiful, in beautiful surroundings, and then you look at where you are in the moment. Comparison. Or they pull up in your driveway and they've got new dealer tags on the front of their car and yours just came back from the shop. Comparison. I went to a meeting probably a year and a half ago. It was a gathering of local pastors from the area, and we met at another church for a time of prayer. And I walked in the room where these other pastors were gathered, and most of them were younger than me. But that wasn't really what I noticed. What really got my attention was that every single one of them looked like they had just finished lifting weights and doing 100 sit-ups before they walked into the room. And so you know what I did? I slipped out of the room. I went to the men's room. I untucked my shirt. I rolled up the collar on my long-sleeve shirt, and I walked back in the room, hoping that no one would notice my slightly out-of-style clothes and my unfit body. And that is all I thought about the whole evening. It's all I thought about the whole evening. I know that's not right, but it's what happened. I mean, comparison can be deadly. I mean, I understand what Paul was talking about in 2 Corinthians 10:12 when he wrote, we do not dare classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. I mean, when they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they're not wise. And so what that says to me is when we compare ourselves to others, we always put ourselves in a dangerous place. Because either we'll end up thinking that we're better than them, or we'll end up thinking that they're better than us, and we'll do nothing in all of that but just breed discontentment in our lives. In 1653, Thomas Watson, who was a Puritan preacher and author from England, he wrote a book entitled The Art of Divine Contentment. In this book, he actually made the case that for the Christian, he said discontentment is a sin. He actually said that a discontented Christian is a living, breathing oxymoron. Think about that. A discontented Christian is a living, breathing oxymoron. He wrote this in that book. He said, discontent takes the heart wholly off from God and fixes it on the present trouble, so that a man's mind is not upon his prayer, but upon his cross. And that's exactly what happens. I mean, when you slip into discontentment, your focus zeroes in on you and on what's missing in your life, or what doesn't measure up, or what could be better in your life. And so you end up being bitter, or you end up being jealous, or you even end up being depressed. And so you start searching for what it is that you don't have that you think you need. And I'm just going to tell you, as long as you're searching for it, you'll never find the contentment that you need, because it's not out there. It's not out there. There was a Baptist preacher in the 1870s named Dr. Russell Conwell. And he had an experience in his life that led to a story that he told that was one of the most impactful stories of his generation. He told it thousands of times, actually wrote a book about it, and it was the story of Ali Hafed. Ali Hafed was a man of great wealth. He lived in ancient Persia, which is now India, and he had a huge estate. On that estate was a huge farm, and it had orchards and grain fields and beautiful gardens. He had any and everything he needed to live a long life without any cares or without any needs. You might say that he was content. Very content. That is, until a Buddhist priest came by one day to visit. And this Buddhist priest came by Ali Hafed's house, and they were sitting in front of a fire, and they were talking about life, and the Buddhist priest began to talk to Ali Hafed about diamonds. He told Ali Hafed that there are diamonds that can be found, that if you find one that's as big as your thumb, it could buy the entire country. Ali Hafed had never seen diamonds. He was intrigued by this, and he said, well, my goodness, where can I find diamonds like what you're talking about? And the Buddhist monk said, you have to look for them. You have to go and find them. You'll oftentimes find them in a river that runs through white sands, a lot of times between high mountains. That's where you'll find them. But one thing is for sure, you have to go look for them. So before this Buddhist monk came to Ali Hafed's house, Ali Hafed had everything he could ever need or desire. Everything. He was a wealthy man by every standard that you might use to measure wealth. And he had all of that until that Buddhist monk came and told him about diamonds, because when he went to bed that night, he, in his own mind, had nothing. You would have thought that he was the most impoverished person in the world. And so Ali Hafed woke up the next morning with one desire, and one desire only, and that was to find these diamonds that the Buddhist monk told him about. And so, you know what he did? He sold his farm. He put his family in the care of some friends, and then he went off in search of diamonds. He went to Africa, he went to Egypt, he went to Europe, he went everywhere he could possibly go across the known world looking for diamonds, and he never found any. He ended up spending every dollar that he had in search of diamonds, never to find a single one, and one day he ended up sitting on the shores of Barcelona, Spain. He had gone all over the world looking for these diamonds that could bring him untold wealth, and he never found a single diamond. He was depressed. He was hopeless. He was in despair. I mean, he had spent all of his wealth in search of something that he never was able to find. And he took his life that day. But that's not the end of the story. The person who purchased Ali Hafed's farm was one day riding his camel on the farm, and the camel stopped at a stream to get a drink, and he was sitting on top of his camel looking down into that stream and saw a sparkling stone, and he got off the camel, picked it up, took it back to the house, and later discovered that it was a diamond, which actually became the first diamond discovered in what became the greatest diamond mine on the planet. There's a fort there now. It's a tourist attraction. It's the mine of Golconda, and in fact, the crown jewels of England and Russia were found in that diamond mine. So here's the point of the story. Ali Hafed sold his farm. He sold everything that he had and unsuccessfully went all over the known world in search of diamonds. And yet, if he had just looked on his own farm, he would have discovered that everything he had been searching for was beneath him. Had he dug deeply where he was, then everything that he was looking for, everything that he was searching for, was beneath him and was with him the whole time. And so it is with us. I mean, this says to me two things about our lives and about how we live them right now and every single day. And the first is this, that gratitude is the fuel for contentment. I mean, if comparison is the fuel for discontentment, gratitude is the fuel for contentment. Gratitude. It's about finding joy in what you have. It's about being thankful in any circumstance that you face, as Paul wrote about in 1 Thessalonians 5:16 and Ephesians 5:20 and Philippians 4:6. I mean, Solomon wrote this in Ecclesiastes 6:9. He said, enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have. You know what? Despite what Bono says, you really will find what you're looking for. I mean, you will. If you want to look for bad things in this world, guess what? You're going to find them. If you want to look for good things in this world, you know what? You'll find them too. You see, contented Christianity is not about filling up every void and every shortcoming of our lives with things or with people or with activities that might make us feel better in the moment. Contented Christianity is about recognizing what Ali Hafed didn't realize, and that was that the secret of contentment isn't somewhere out there. It's right here. It's right here. Which leads to what I would consider to be the last and really I would say the most important truth of the day. It is, as I would describe, the secret of contentment. And that is that Jesus is enough. Jesus is enough. Every Thursday, some members of our staff gather together for an hour of prayer time. We started this a couple of months ago, and it has become an hour for those of us who gather that we've grown to love. And I mean, it's just a sweet time of fellowship with one another and communion with the Lord. And this past week, we gathered for our time of prayer, and we conclude. And during that time, different ones of us that were there were talking about how hard it is sometimes just to hear the Lord in the midst of all the noise that surrounds us. And so we spent the last 10 minutes of our time together just in silent prayer. Nobody spoke a word out loud. It was just a time for us to spend in silence, just speaking to the Lord and listening for him to speak back to us. And so we spent, I don't know if you've spent 10 minutes of quiet time lately, but it's kind of hard to do that because we're so prone to fill our spaces with noise, but it's very refreshing. And so we spent 10 minutes, and then after that time of silent prayer, different ones of us shared our experience in that 10 minutes. And I asked Will if I could say this. Will talked about his 10 minutes of prayer time, and he said that during his prayer time, he asked God to give him a clear picture of what the future looked like for him. And Will said, I was expecting that God would answer my prayer by just sort of spreading out his hand saying, here's the future. I mean, isn't that what we want? You know, we ask God, tell me about we just kind of expect God to just lay it all out there clearly. Here it is. This is the future for you. Will said, God didn't do that. Instead of doing this sweeping hand of showing the full table that God wants to set in front of him, he said God gave him a different image. God gave him the image of a father reaching back to take the hand of a child and lead them through whatever the future might bring. And when Will shared that, I thought about what the Lord was leading me to say today, and I listened to what Will said. I thought, that's it. I mean, that's what Paul was talking about when he talked about how he had learned the secret of contentment. I mean, we can spend all of our lives in search of the things that we need in order to fill the voids in our lives. And all the while, there's a nail-scarred hand that's reaching back to us, longing for us just to take hold of it so that he can lead us through our circumstances and lead us through our lives and care for us and protect us and give us everything that we need to be and do all that he wants us to do. But so often we're just doing this. We're looking, or we're hoping, or we're desiring, and we're asking, Lord, give me a roadmap. And he's just saying, take my hand. Take my hand. Listen, until Christ is all you have, you'll never come to grips with the fact that Christ is all you need. You'll always be looking for the next thing. You'll always be hoping for the one thing that you don't have that you think will bring fulfillment and contentment in your life. When standing right in front of you is one who gave it all, who's reaching his hand back, just saying, take it, take it. This is what you need. I am enough. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, there's going to come a point in time when we're going to inherit glorious riches from God that we will be able to enjoy forever. They'll never be taken away from us. They will never diminish. They will never rust. They will never fade. They will be there forever. But the question remains, what about now? How do I live right now in this culture of discontent? Well, I would just encourage you, don't try to find contentment by changing your circumstances. Don't think that contentment will come into your life. They'll just flood in your life with something new. A place or a thing or a person. And don't get caught in the quagmire of comparison. Don't let that happen. It's so easy to slip there. But don't get caught up in that. And then third, try to grow a garden of gratitude in your life. You know? Try to grow a garden of gratitude in your life. Just instead of looking at all the things that are wrong, look at what's right. Focus on what the Lord is doing and not what is yet to be done. Focus on what he is doing in the moment. And I believe that you will then grow a garden of gratitude in your life. And then finally, remember that Jesus is enough. In fact, he's more than enough, really. How often we forget that. I pray that if you come to one of those moments of frustration or discontent, that you will see the one who gave everything for you. And you will recognize that he's reaching back for you to take his hand, where he will lead you through whatever it is that you're facing. And he will be for you more than enough. And then, I believe, then you will discover, as Paul did, the secret of contentment.